we are experiencing what it feels like to be a soul in a physical body.
Love the people around you. Love is the most powerful force in the universe. And as you love the people around you, please remember to love yourself.
And if you could have absolute control to create your experience, would you make different choices in your life? What's keeping you from making those choices now?
Show your whole soul fearlessly. And that's the good, the bad, and the ugly. You don't have to be some sort of paragon of virtue.
All these experiences are just there for growth, expansion, evolution, and it's a gift. So.
I've tried a lot of energy healing modalities over the years, and as an energy sensitive, I can easily tell if something is legitimate. Hands down, one of my best experiences has been with Jamie of refractive healing. Refractive healing is a unique technique that channels rainbow light energy through your energy body. And let me tell you, I could feel its calming and supportive light flowing downward through my crown. I even received a physical healing during my session. I cannot recommend Jamie's work highly enough. Book your $22 refractive boost distant healing session with Jamie today at refractivehealing.com. Check the description or the pinned comment for the link. Thank you to Refractive Healing for partnering with me in this video.
Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the channel for our second fireside chat. Thank you for joining us today. I'm so excited to be here with Jeff Olsen.
It's an honor. It's so good to be with you. Thank you.
Karen Thomas.
I'm glad to be here and looking forward to all of us getting to chat and share.
Jacob Cooper.
Thank you for having me.
And Anastasia Wesselink Moellering.
Such a pleasure to be here.
Can I just say what a thrill it is to have the opportunity to be not only with you, but with Karen and Jake and Anastasia. I have rarely had, I do a lot of things like this, but I don't often get to be surrounded by near-death experiencers and people that are doing so much good in the world. So thank you.
I am equally just as excited. I know all of these faces and names and feel like I am definitely the newcomer to the group here and have learned so much from listening to everybody's story here. So I'm really honored to be a part of this group and have the conversation about all of our experiences and what we've taken away from those.
Really excited to be together with folks that I have learned so much about from, in the case of Jeff and Jake, reading their books.
I agree with everything that everyone just said. I grew up an athlete, and I played a lot of team sports. And so when I do interviews, it kind of reminds me of playing, singles tennis where it's just me and the interviewer, which is great. Nothing wrong with volleying, but here there's a strength in the group, there's strength in the pack. And I think with near-death experiencers, we're growing 5 to 10% of the population, as they say, and there's a growing number of us. So there's a strength in numbers. So I agree. I think it's beautiful that we're doing this. So thank you.
So the first question I have, number one, is if you could sum up the message of your near-death experience or the most important thing that you brought back, what would it be and how has it changed you?
Who's got the fastball tonight?
Well, let's start with the $10 million question. And yeah, it's a great question. And I've been asked, gosh, what's the one thing that you bring back? And for me, and I'll be as concise as I can, it is love. It is unconditional love. And it's that we have that choice, that I am in control of my life, that I am a manifestation of the divine creator in such a way that I can choose. I can choose to be angry. I can choose to be resentful, or I can choose joy, and I can choose to be love and to show up as the unconditional love that I experienced. And there aren't words to describe or explain that unconditional love that was a part of my experience. But coming back, it's like, wow, if I can be in some small way that for even one person, that's the takeaway to me.
I have to second that motion. I really do. Love is the thing that you come back with, And once you've been in that unconditional love, you just have such a difficult time trying to put it into words to people, but it takes away so much in the way of judgment, in the way of anger, animosity, all those negative emotions. You're a human being. You're still living a very human life. And so you'll have encounters where those types of emotions come up to you. But knowing that that unconditional love of our Creator is there within all of us just makes such a big difference. It's entirely different in how you go through every day. And when you have an opportunity to express that unconditional love to someone else, anyone that you might encounter, it just is so fulfilling to be able to do that and to be able to let them know that they are part of our Creator. They have that unconditional love as well. So that's what I've found is the most important thing.
Yeah. I know one of your former guests is Christian. He wrote a book called A Walk in the Physical. And I learned so much from my colleagues, and I think that's a wonderful title, but I would agree with him that this is just an experience. It's experience of ourselves, and most importantly, it's experience of our inner being. And I think so much of this is being able to have recollection of how we are so much more than our judgments and the world that we were, shaped in and brought up in. And it's just a reminder, from the greatest points of suffering that so many people have, that deep in there, there's an eye in the hurricane, and that's a beautiful place to be in. And, I think near-death experiences and transformative experiencers really touch, that point and remind everyone of that infinite reality as not just a possibility.
Yeah, and I'll echo everything that each one has already said. And I think for me, it was really quite an awareness and epiphany that we're not just our physical bodies. These bodies are here to give us an experience here in a physical life. But what we are is so much bigger, so much more infinite, so much more complex than any words that any of us have ever come up with. We all struggle. And I know some that have had, their near death experiences, recently, and some that have had them decades ago. And regardless of how much time has passed, it's such an intimate and personal experience. We can feel it within us, but the vocabulary that really reflects that experience it's just not there. It lacks everything, but we try our best with as many metaphors and comparisons as we possibly can to get there. But ultimately, the experiences here are all accentuated through this connection that we can build back to that awareness that we are so much more than our bodies. And through that connection, that feeling, we cultivate the greatest and the strongest love, not only for just the people and the loved ones in our lives, but for all of existence, for this entire experience.
Beautiful. Thank you, guys. Does anyone have anything else they want to say before we move on? No? Okay. So question 2, and I'll preface this by saying it is not a trick question. It can make people nervous sometimes, but because a lot of my viewers come from a deconstructing Christian background, this is of real interest to them. Who is Jesus to you, and how would you best describe his role?
Wow. Am I the guy that that's just, this is such a loaded question because I grew up in a conservative Christian home.
Mm-hmm.
And gosh, that was the world to me. And in many ways still is, but it has expanded in such a beautiful way. And I might articulate this for a little bit, but I grew up believing that life was a test, that God would judge me, and that I was probably failing the test and was probably in trouble, and boy, somebody will have to save me because in and of myself, I'm no good, right? The interesting thing in the experience, and this turned things inside out and upside down for me, But in the experience, I realized that life was not so much a test, it was an absolute gift. It was a beautiful, glorious gift. And the judgments, that I thought or believed would be coming my way, the judgments and comparisons just went out the window. There was so much unconditional love. And we say that word, we say that term, but boy, unconditional. It seems that we put conditions on all love in this realm. We put conditions on everything. And I experienced something so unconditional, so profound. And yet what it did, it expanded my connection, my feelings of the person we call Jesus. And I realized in many ways what he was teaching was so much different than what I believed. It like opened this whole new doorway of how I experienced my own divinity, which was very difficult for me to say for years. Anastasia, you processed it for a year or two. I processed it for 7 or 8 years because I had experienced that I was divine, that I was perfect, and I didn't know how to say that. And yet now when I read or ponder and let me just be as bold as to say, I am so close to this ascended master we call Jesus, but I realize what he was teaching is of our divinity. The glory you gave me, Father, I have given them. Walk on the water, Peter. Why do you doubt? Greater things will you do than I. I'm quoting biblical New Testament scripture. He was teaching of our divinity. He was teaching of our connection. He was teaching of our oneness. And yet somehow that gets shrouded and turns into judgment and, hell. And I know so many people may disagree with what I say. I get so much hate mail when I speak of unconditional love because many want to back into, no, it is all conditional. And yet my experience was something so different than that. I'm a bigger, and I don't know what words to use. I'm a bigger fan. I'm a bigger, I have a stronger connection with Jesus than I ever did before my near-death experience. But it also I've realized, wow, it is not about religion. It's not about Christianity. It's about love. And we're all on our own perfect, unique journey, whatever religion we adhere to or follow, or none at all. It's our perfect path. And I often feel like religion segregates us so much, and yet sometimes it may not even bring us closer to the divine. If it brings us closer to the divine, to our source, to our greater power, whatever that is for someone personally, that's great. Now, having said that, religion does some beautiful things in the world. Some wonderful things. Organized religion can be a powerful force for good. I see all the things about refugees recently on social media and what's going on. Gosh, the Catholic Church alone has done more for refugees with millions of dollars and man hours and power. Organized religion can be a very good thing. So when I say, wow, religion, was undone for me, yes, it was, but I honor it. And yet now it seems like it's the means to that end of really embracing not only the divinity within myself, and Karen, you said this, the divinity in everyone else, the divinity within everyone else. There's that beautiful term that Jesus said in the Sermon on the Mount, blessed are the pure in heart, for they shall see God. Now, in my near-death experience, I experienced God. I used to daydream about what would that be like to see God. But now when I read that verse, it is different. And I'll get blasted for this too. I'm not changing the Bible, but when I read that verse, it says, blessed are the pure in heart, for they shall see God. in everything and in everyone. And that's what shifted for me. Suddenly, it was not just, this creator out there somewhere. It became a part of me and it became a part of everyone else. And as I read and look, I feel like that's what Jesus was teaching. That's what he was perpetuating. That was his message. That was his ministry. And he is, for me, an icon of empathy. He descended beneath all things that he could rise above them all so that he would have empathy. And given what I've been through and even the near-death experience, people have asked me that too. What did you get? What did you get out of all this? If you were to boil that down to one thing, now my first answer was unconditional love. Yes, but what did I get? What did I gain? I really believe it's empathy. Compassion made me a more compassionate person. And I love the compassion and the empathy, in the figure of Jesus. And I embrace that and honor that. And I love him. And I love so many of the ascended masters and all those that show up in love to bring us together, to create that oneness that Jesus spoke about in John chapter 17, rather than trying to divide us and make us separate.
Oh, I can't say how much I agree with all of what you've said. For me, this year, it's going to be 40 years since I had my near-death experience. And at the time that I had it, I saw myself as being a born-again Christian. And with that concept that I had of it at that point in time, I worried a great deal about being good enough to be there in heaven. And on the same path, I knew that there were relatives of mine, people I loved dearly, like my father and my brother, who had never been born again Christians. And so one part of me was saying, well, they're not going to be there if I am there. So there was all of this concern and judgment of them and of myself and of everyone prior to my having my near-death experience. And when I had it and I had my life review, all I felt was complete acceptance, non-judgment, unconditional love. And that word unconditional is very difficult for people to wrap their head around, because this life on earth is such a conditional and competitive and judging environment. So after my near-death experience, I went through quite a period of time when I described it as trying to fit the square peg into the round hole. I took what my experience was and then tried to carry it back into the fundamentalist church that I had been in. And every time I heard sermons on judgment and sermons on the sheep and the goats and those that make it and those that don't. All of that just grated against me so much and was so not in resonating with what I had experienced that eventually I ended up stepping away from religion, structured religion as a whole, and trying to learn more and more about what I had actually felt and learned through my near-death experience. Over time, I ended up coming back to the church, but with a whole different attitude toward who Jesus is, who Jesus always was. And I went through a course that was a 4-year course called Education for Ministry. And it was basically to learn all about the Bible and about Christianity, aimed at lay people within the church and how they could find their mission or their job. And what I learned so much during that about that fit with what I had actually experienced in my near-death experience. And I learned that there were a lot of historical details that were distorted when coming from the original Hebrew and going through Greek translations, and then finally coming into time periods where the church became very political and was the Church of Rome, and how much got built into the faith that was so much different than the simplicity of Jesus's message. And when you really looked at it, that message of unconditional love was there all along, all the way through. I got so that when I read scripture, I could read what was unconditional love and God and what was man's version of fear that had twisted the message and made it into something that didn't fit with who Jesus actually was. A prime example is Jesus, when he was on the cross, said, "Father, forgive them. They know not what they do." And he also said to the thief, he said, "This day you will be with me in paradise." Now that flies in the face of a lot of fundamental Christianity, because he didn't say, "First acknowledge that I'm the only Son of God and ask me to forgive all of your sins, and then you will be able to be in heaven." He said, "This day, unconditionally." And he also didn't say that when you die, when I come back a second time, your body's going to be resurrected, and then you will be able to be in heaven with me. So there are a number of things that when you really study in depth, which I took the time to do, don't add up with what a lot of what the actual church does continue to teach. And that's not their fault. They are dealing with the Bible as it stands today, and after it went through a lot of what it went through. But Jesus himself was that ascended master who was here to teach that love was the answer, and that unconditional love. And it was expressed in many different ways. And so I see him that way, and I feel him in the same way I felt God's unconditional love during my near-death experience. And so I honor him, and I honor a great deal of what did filter through and still ended up in scripture today. So I guess if you're asking, how do I see Jesus? I love him, as Jeff said, and I honor him, and I feel that I now understand his message in ways that I never did before.
I just want to chime in and say, amen. Thank you. It's so hard to put this in words, and it's so loaded. And I know the others want to speak. I'm too. I read a book called Prayers to the Cosmos, which went through that. It went from the ancient Aramaic, to the Hebrew, to the Greek, to the Germanic language, and it broke down some of this language and what it really may have meant back when it was said or when it was done. I went into a deep dive of all those things. And I think, and I just want to say this, and then we can move on. The basis of my belief before the near-death experience was that I was not good enough. I never would be good enough. That I was unworthy, that no matter what I did, I would never be good enough in the eyes of God. I would never qualify. And that was, that was held very, that was my belief. That shifted when I was held in the arms of God. I felt that love. And the interesting thing for me, and I know many of you have read the book, I was holding my own son who was killed in the car crash. Mm-hmm. And so it was multiplied, it was magnified. Here I am holding my own son, and
you know how much you loved him.
Yeah. And it's like, hey, you're every bit as much my boy as that little child you hold. Do you not understand how much we love you? And I didn't. I mean, God was fear and judgment and a measuring stick. And suddenly it became a very personal, divine connection, multiplied by me holding my own child. And yet it was a very personal experience, but it rippled out. I knew that was true of every living soul. I don't care what color, creed, religion, preference. I felt it as if the whole universe was singing to me, look at the love that God, the divine, whatever words you want to put on it, has for its children, for the manifestations, for you and you and you and you and you and all of this. You've put me on a soapbox, Karen, but thank you for sharing. And I just wanted to, I mean, this isn't, it was a personal experience. It's only my experience. I'm not saying I have the answers. I'm just saying based on my experience, wow, suddenly I understood what love was. And suddenly I understood that Jesus was a manifestation of that love. And yet so can I be, and so can all of us.
And doesn't it make you think, like your experience with your son and God made me think of the scripture where Jesus is trying to tell the people, who among you, if your child asked you for bread, would give him a stone? You know, how much more does your Father in heaven love you and want to give to you? You know? So, and so within the church, I now find that there are so many wonderful people within the church, as you described, who are giving up their love and wanting to give that love to other people. And that community of love is a great place, a good feeling. I just feel bad that all of them don't realize that the T's don't need to be crossed, the I's don't need to be dotted. They are already enough. And I feel sometimes people are doing a lot of the good things they're doing to try to feel worthy, as opposed to already knowing that they are.
And I think this is such a big question that we could have probably set aside this entire fireside chat just to talk around this one topic. And contrary to Jeff and to Karen's experience, I grew up in an atheist house. My mother was an atheist. She raised me to have morals and values simply for the sake of having them, but they were not molded around the idea of meeting a religious judgment or following a religious script. And so in my 20s, early 30s, I was thrusted into the Christian church and the Christian world through my family. And when I started reading the Bible, one of the things that really stood out to me was this idea that I felt that the messages that were coming through were really about love. If I were to take the word Jesus and put the word love in its place throughout the Bible, it would be one and the same. And there was one verse in particular that stood out to me prior to my NDE, and I understand it at a very deep level now. And that was, and I am not the Bible person, so please, if anybody knows this actual verse, I know I'm not going to get this quite right, but it's something along the lines of, you can do everything I can do and more. And at the time, it really struck me that what I was reading and how I interpreted that was, we're all together in the ability to do these wonderful, caring, loving, miraculous acts of service. And that Jesus wasn't meant to be put on a pedestal, that it was more a partnership. It was an equal. It was an example, if you will, an example of what our potential is here, not only in the human body, but just our potential to be unconditional love. Fast forward to after my NDE, and I believe I said this, Melissa, in our conversation in our first interview, I just sum it up by saying that God is a verb. God is not a noun. God is action. God is love. God is unconditional. And if you make God and Jesus synonymous, it's one and the same. And I would even go so far as to say, with the connection of the oneness that I experienced, Jesus would be one with all of us. It wouldn't be something separate. We are all connected. We are as much a part of a Jesus as a Jesus is a part of all of us. And there is no need to prove ourselves. There is no need to get a lesson right. There is no need to check a box here. We can simply look to Jesus as the example of our potential to be loving, compassionate, empathetic human beings with each other.
Yeah, I mean, you all just summed it up beautifully and perfectly. I come from a very, modern Orthodox, Jewish background. So this for me on a personal level has been one of the most challenging topics of conversation to have in my near-death experience. But I think that's with any breakthrough is, not focus so much on the outside opposition, but the inner, energy that you have and what you're connected to. And that's a test that I know Jesus really was really about that, right? When he was talking about the pillars of foundation of his own faith and the opposition, and that's the life that he lived. And I think, with eternal life, it's open-ended, it's eternal, it's infinite understanding. And I think as a near-death experiencer, that's the way that I look at all of life, where I don't have a possessiveness of what is, but I look at everything with curiosity, exploration, and it's open-ended versus closed-ended. And I think, books and
You froze. We lost you, Jake.
I was going to say, did he freeze up on you guys?
But
Yeah.
in the portion where I was telling you about trying to fit the square peg into the round hole, I think with Jesus's own followers, that they had all been steeped in their Judaism and their conditional God that they had been taught all of their lives. And so I think for a long time themselves were taking that square peg and trying to fit it into the round hole of God as they knew God through their Judaism. So I understood that completely because of having gone through the experience of me trying to fit my experience and the God I encountered into all of the boxes that I had within my Christianity faith up to that point.
Yeah.
And it's so much broader than that, so much more expansive than that. And yet, as Anastasia said, Jesus, I believe, was sent purposely to try to say, this is unconditional love in action.
Yeah.
This is how it happens and how you can express it. And all of you can, and all of you have it within you. The kingdom of heaven is within you. So much of that.
I love that. Yeah, I do love that. And I've contemplated this much. I mean, this, like I say, Jesus is the iconic figure in my life. It's like, yep, that's my mentor. That's the man. Buddha, Krishna, Muhammad. I mean, you could go into many masters and many ascended masters. Interesting enough, and I wish Jake was still on.
Yeah.
Jesus still chose to be Jewish. He practiced his Judaism right up to the very end, at the sheets. And so in my own life, I'm like, wow, this experience has expanded me in so many ways. And yet I can still honor my religious practices, and perhaps they'll mean even more, rather than doing it because, I want to somehow be worthy. I can do it to honor and truly commune, rather than trying to check off the boxes, and please a
Figurehead.
a figurehead that's going to be angry at me no matter what I do anyway. So it's a beautiful conversation, and it's a loaded conversation, Melissa. You've brought the questions that are going to make us dig deep and find the words here.
Well, thank you all for sharing your perspectives here. It's too bad that we lost Drake right when he was in the middle of talking, but if he comes back on, maybe we'll give him a chance to finish. Did anyone else want to say anything before we move on to the third question? Okay.
I would say this, because there's going to be people listening and say, well, what about my religion? Well, what about my beliefs? Or what about the fact that I don't have one, or that whatever brings you closer to the divine, whatever brings you closer to that divine part within yourself that says, wow, I feel that love. I feel that light. I feel that peace and joy. Do that. I mean, do that. We tend to want to fight over religion or debate, scripture or debate beliefs. And it's like, you know what? If we could put all that aside and honor whatever brings an individual closest to the divine. Gosh, I've had beautiful experiences in the church pew. I've had beautiful experiences in sweat lodge. I've had beautiful experiences, sometimes in the darkest moments of my life that brought me closer to the divine. And that's what I invite people to honor. Do those things that let you feel God's love or allow you to feel closer to that. And I don't know. I'm
That's
probably
exactly it. That's exactly it.
Yeah, I'm rambling, but don't dismiss religion or your beliefs. Lean into those and do those things that bring you closer to the divine. I just learned there's no judgment of what that looks like. It's an individual path, and I will honor the path someone's on if it brings them closer to love and being more loving.
I think there's another piece to this too, because, since my experience, I have just been such a consumer of so many other near-death experiences. I just am so magnetized to them. I want to hear about them. I want to learn about everybody's experience. And what I find so fascinating is it seems universal across the board for the ones that I've listened to, that regardless of your religious perspective and position going into an NDE, everybody pretty much universally comes out with the same feeling, the same knowing that it is an unconditional, all loving oneness. Some people may call it a God. Some people may put religious figure names on it. But in the end, even if you were to extract all that, you were to unwrap all of those terms that we've used and have all agreed collectively to say that this represents unconditional love or this represents unconditional love. If you could take all those away, what's left is all the same. We've just used the different ways that our culture and the way that we've grown as a society to try to understand our place in that unconditional love. But when you take it all away, it's all the same.
Yeah, I'm really glad that you brought that up, Jeff, because it's such an important point, I think.
Well, that was a point I thought, gosh, maybe I should just leave church. Maybe I should just not go. Maybe what am I getting out of it? And yet, spirit, I call it spirit, that whisper said, well, what are you giving to it? Maybe rather than walking away from it, maybe you could be a light within it. Maybe you could actually be a light within it and have influence in your circle of influence in a small community or a small congregation. And that might be a way of being love and serving in a way that you wouldn't have if you just went into a cave all alone and meditated all day. And I'm not dismissing that either. I do that some days too, but Jake is back. I wanted to hear what Jake had to say.
Yeah, Jake.
It was interesting. I mean, as we know with near-death experiencers, we have a big impact on technology, and this personifies it. So thank you so much for your understanding. I am really sorry. What I'm using now is my backup computer. I was able to link it up, and it worked. Mercury is in retrograde, which impacts communication, internet connections. So I am so sorry about that. Thank you so much for your understanding. Thank goodness for my other backup computer.
Hey, we've all had those technical issues, and it kind of goes with being a near-death experiencer.
I've been noticing that much later, but I'm so sorry about that. But yes, what I was saying is the relationship with God and Jesus is very much personal, and it's very much open-ended. And I continually have daily further understandings and further connections from that inner relationship. And I think part of the issue is when you have an experience, the energy of that experience that Jesus had, a lot of the energy of also has been reflected on, what happened on the cross and some of the opposition. And I think so much of people who are into Jesus are really so much of the oppressors throughout history versus embodying who he truly was. And so I think really what's about is just like taking an orange and squeezing it out and focusing on what the essence is there versus coming from the ego and chopping things up and being like Christ versus the oppressors. I think that's important. But yes, it does personify, us near death experiencers and eternal life and having, in a way, I look at near death experiencers as Christ like. And that might sound pompous or arrogant in a way, but I think so many people, so many near death experiences go through the pits of trauma. Not only what happens to us physically, but also, you know, having to explain ourselves and having a world that pushes back and ridicules us. And so I think near death experiencers have a lot of, in common with the life that Jesus lived. And I think so much of what we do is really to personify that same exact message, that of love, of eternity, of the kingdom, that we're all connected to, and that we're not here just to create heaven on earth, but we literally are beings of heaven here on earth. And we're here to remember that each and every day in every way. So I'm hoping that Jesus will be with me on my computer and this Wi-Fi, and I'm hooked up to that. So, you know,
Yeah,
I'm gonna have internal net versus internet.
when you jumped off, I was reminding the group that Jesus was Jewish. He practiced his Judaism.
That's right. He was like a socialistic Jewish rabbi. People forget that.
Yeah. I do love that, and I think it's important to embrace those things and be open to whatever comes. Just be open to the possibilities.
Yeah. It's boring when you have like this is it kind of thing, and eternity isn't, infinite isn't just that. It's infinite. It goes on and on, and so that's
Yeah,
beautiful.
and this may sound blasphemous to some. I mean, of course, Jesus was crucified. That was his charge, was blasphemy. He was saying, I'm divine. I'm a divine manifestation of that. If you've seen me, you've seen the Father. Why do you ask such silly questions, right? And there's all kinds of theologies wrapped around that. But we could embrace, as humanity, the story of Jesus as a personal path. Wow. What crosses do I have to bear? And I'm not comparing that. I'm just saying we all will bear our own crosses. We will all have our own Gethsemanes. We will all, have to lay down that part of us that must die to rise into a greater consciousness, a greater way of being, a more divine, eternal. I mean, to me, it's embracing the eternal divine beings that we are, and kind of laying aside those things that don't serve or support our highest good. I think Anastasia said it. I mean, Jesus was he the perfect prototype for what we were all created to be, that kind, compassionate, loving, divine, eternal being? Well, I can embrace that, and it inspires me rather than making me feel unworthy and not good enough. That inspires me to say, hey, you know what? Tomorrow I can get up and do a little bit better, perhaps,
Wonderful. Question number 3 is there any spiritual significance to the things we are experiencing in the world? And if so, how can we best position ourselves during this time?
I will chime in and say there's spiritual significance to everything. There is no accidents. There are no coincidences. There's spiritual significance to everything. Now, on a personal level, that may be interpreted different ways. I mean, during the pandemic and the lockdowns, I realized how important connection is. And it may not be a physical connection, but a spiritual connection. Wow, honoring our bodies, this magnificent machine, which mine was so beat up, and I still deal with pain and the injuries and all that goes with it. But what an incredible, magnificent machine our bodies are. I don't have to remind my lungs how to breathe or tell my heart to beat or teach my eyes how to see. What an incredible machine, and so honoring that. Also, you never know what may come next. We have no idea what tomorrow brings, so don't worry about it. Take no heed, what you'll eat or drink on the morrow. Be in the present moment of now. Be in the present moment of right now and enjoy that. Consider the birds, how they fly. Consider the lilies, how they grow. All these teachings of the Master Jesus, of being in that present moment of right now. And what do I do right now? What do I do today? And what's important as my heart beats without being reminded? And what am I being maybe is far more important than what am I doing?
I think too, as far as this particular question, I think what can be paramount right now and is for a number of different people are the aspects of fear and the aspects of separateness and antagonism between people who are convinced of one thing and people who are convinced of another thing. And I think we're going through this time period and these experiences to help us express conditional love even in these circumstances. And I love what you said about really appreciating connectedness, because it seems as though this is something that's these experiences are tending to pull us apart rather than connect us together. So unconditional love says, how can we still connect? And how can we still keep expressing that unconditional love in these otherwise challenging experiences?
It feels like to me, we plant bulbs in the fall here. The bulbs that we put in the dirt in the ground. I'm in Utah, and we do that in the fall. So in the spring, these beautiful flowers come up. But in order for that to happen, that bulb has to completely come apart. It literally has to come undone. And sometimes for me, it feels like, wow, everything's coming undone. That perhaps something far more beautiful, something far more, lovely might emerge out of it.
Yeah, I think from the perspective that I have right now, and I have to acknowledge the fact that I'm still very early in the processing of everything I experienced. And so I feel like there's still this continuous unfolding of what I experienced and how I understand it and how I talk about it. But from where I'm at right now, I think on one hand, it's really hard for, at least for me, to try to comment on that because I still have a very close connection to that experience of oneness, the experience of being complete, the experience that there is nothing that is wrong. And so when I look around me and I see the world struggling with something like a collective experience, like a pandemic, and the personal traumas and struggles that families have when they've lost loved ones or they lost their livelihood through jobs and just all the things that we hear that are happening, especially for those that, live in America and they see the polarization that's happening within our country. We can all look at that and focus on all of those aspects and really feel pretty crummy about it. But so close to this experience that I've had, I look at it and go, it's all exactly perfect. It's all reflective of what we all bring to this experience right now. And if you were to take this entire lifetime and you were to take this life from the moment we're born until the moment we die, some of them are shorter, some of them are longer, but regardless of the length of time, every single life is precious, whether it's 1 second of life or 100 years of life. And so when we can focus in on the fact that right now we each have an opportunity to do something miraculous and not focus on the fear and the limitations and the traumas, but really focus on the beautiful aspect of life being a miracle, it becomes a very different conversation. But at the same time, I can say that because I've experienced something outside of this that I can reflect and compare it to. Not everybody actually gets that opportunity. But if you were to take this entire lifetime in comparison to the entire life of a soul, and I use the word soul very loosely. I know there's different people call it something different, but I love the word soul because if you break down the acronym, it's the spirit of unconditional love. And to me, that's exactly what we are. So for me, the soul is just this beautiful, infinite expression of oneness in this lifetime, as long as it may seem, as a blink of an eye. It is one little itty bitty little grain of sand in an entire earth of possibilities. It's just one experience. And we have infinite experiences as a soul. And so I think on one hand, when you put the experience of what's going on in that perspective, it really minimizes the fear and the need to be reactive. And it puts us more in a place of being compassionate and understanding and looking for what we can do for our own part in all of it to help us move past this.
That's beautiful. And I love your soul and spirit of unconditional love.
Thank you. It came to me right after my NDE, so I just kind of used that now I know that there are so many different ways that we can reflect to that part of ourselves that isn't physical, and different people have different words that they use. But for me, it does boil down to unconditional love.
Yeah, today, now that we're recording it, I was just notified that a great spiritual teacher and leader from Plum Village by the name of Thich Nhat Hanh at 90, I think he was 95, crossed over. And those familiar with Thich, he really personified, mindfulness, presence. And on Netflix did a documentary on him called Walk With Me, but just an amazing, incredible leader. And just you could sense his energy and just take one look and just feel presence. And I think really that's what these times are about, where yes, you can go to a Tibetan monastery and be there, but I think this pandemic over the last couple of years has forced in one way or another, hopefully people to retreat to someplace inward and to live from the inside out versus the outside in. And there's many ways to engage with impermanence. I think a lot of people talk about eternity on the other side, but they think there's eternity here in the physical body. And as near-death experiencers, we're here to attest that this body is finite. We're infinite, but this body, this lifetime, this ego, this personality, this path, you know, is finite. And so how do we engage with that? And I think that's been expedited to a lot of people where we just went on cruise control versus having a recollection of that. Near-death experiencers remember that. And so we can engage with that in fear, trepidation, divisiveness, attacking, or we could engage in mindfulness with wisdom, compassion, understanding, and understanding that the life that we live is very reflective of how we connect to that inner being. And that's how we see and reflect on others. And so I think it's really about being present in the present and living while we're living, because so many people, have not. It's lived an outside in versus inside out. And, that's something that near-death experiencers understand. But this same playbook, but this rug being pulled of this life that we were living, just kind of yanked from us. And now having to, adjust, and obviously there's a lot of trauma that people go through, and it's a similar storm. Everyone's in their own unique situation, as we alluded to, but we have to, yes, integrate mindfulness, but integrate mindfulness with a good foundation, of wisdom, compassion, empathy, and interconnection, versus being kind of a leaf in water versus generating this own beautiful current within. I think that's what's important during these times.
Can I just say I'm just taking this in. I mean, Melissa, this is as big for me as anybody. What wonderful comments and sentiments and wisdom. I love it. Thank you.
Oh yeah, I
Nice
feel
cat,
the exact same way, just sitting here, taking everything in. Shall we move on to question 4, or did anyone else want to say something?
Nope, that's fine.
Okay.
I love your kitty cat's tail.
This is Kratos.
Beautiful.
Question number 4 is, what would you say to those who are dealing with the grief of losing a loved one?
Wow. That one I know well. They're never lost. They're never lost. They become our guardian angels. And I realize many people may not experience that. I mean, they were here and now those arms that held me and they're no longer in this realm. However, they're never that far away. They are so near. And I remember early on in my grief, that wouldn't have helped. No one could say anything or give advice or do anything to assist me. If you're in that dark night of the soul, just keep breathing. Keep breathing. Get from one breath to the next. And you'll get from 1 hour to the next, and you'll get from one day to the next. And at some point, some magical point, I still cry tears of grief. But the tears aren't bitter anymore. They become sweet. They become sweet. You don't get over it, but you do get used to it. And the bitter tears become sweet tears, and the memories become joyful. I laugh to myself often, remembering where I used to just weep bitterly, remembering. So hang in there and be kind to yourself and allow yourself to grieve. We only grieve because we love. I mean, once again, that's a manifestation of love. If we didn't love, we wouldn't grieve. So allow yourself to grieve, but realize it will get better. And they're never lost. We're connected, no matter what that looks like. When someone we love leaves this realm, our love connects us. We're bound by those beautiful cords of love, and nothing can break them. And they're closer than we could ever imagine. And I think they laugh at me a lot. My loved ones who have passed, my guardian, they just laugh. They think, oh, look at him. But they also weep with us too. They weep with us. And we may be, in many ways, most beautiful when we're most broken. When we're really in it. I think they look from those other realms and say, wow, look what they're learning. Look how their soul is expanding. And they send us love. They send us love from afar.
So I think it's very common for near-death experiencers to get asked the question from people who are grieving, what happens on the other side? Is my loved one okay? Am I going to see them again? Am I going to have a chance to reconnect? And one of the things that I've come to understand is, and again, my experience is completely fluid and I'm still evolving it in my understanding, is that we really kind of come with 4 core feelings that really represent our experience on a soul level. And love, and we talk a lot about unconditional love, but there's also joy, there's also peace. And I would say the 4th one is grief. I think grief is a true core experience of the soul. We can feel that intimate disconnection from something so deeply that it creates a sense of grief. Now, I want to share a story, and this is about you, Jeff, actually. Shortly after my NDE, I was watching videos, and one of the first ones I listened to, Jeff, was your story. And I don't know how many times I had to listen to it. I listened to it, I'd stop it, I'd come back, I'd listen to it again, because it was so deeply moving, even for somebody who, hadn't gone through something like that. I just couldn't. I had to have time to process listening to it, let alone go through that. And my husband is a widower. And so he lost his wife many, many years ago to breast cancer and was left with 2 young children to raise on his own before I met him. And your story was so moving. I shared it with my husband and said, listen to this. There's such an inspirational message here. And he did listen to about half of it, and he was so overwhelmed by your story, he couldn't listen anymore. And so that just really amplifies the fact that grief is real. And I think when we talk about the other side of this beautiful experience, at least for me, I learned I have to be very cautious that I don't invalidate the experience of grief of those that are still here. You can still grieve and also acknowledge the fact that your loved one is in peace. They are in a blissful place. They are complete, and you will see them again. But I also feel like because of our experiences with the other side, we come back with somewhat of a unspoken responsibility to be really cautious and straddle that line carefully with those people who have experienced intense grief.
I like the way you commented about the core things. And when I talk about my experience, I often, I start with the unconditional love, but I also always talk about the tremendous amount of joy that I experienced and what the unbelievable peace, because the peace was one of those things that came back with me right away and that I was filled with and surrounded with right after, as I came back into my body and continued for weeks after that. But then adding on to that, the grief. I think the grief, like you said, it's a key thing because it's a great part of our souls growing in compassion. Because without that deep sense of the grief that you experience, it's very difficult to be as empathetic and compassionate as a full soul wants to be and can be. So it's very important. And I do get contacted quite a bit by people who have lost a loved one. And like you said, it's a very delicate path to cross in communicating with people, because it's so important to acknowledge the depth of that grief and to not to minimize it in any way by trying to project just love and joy and those opposite emotions and feelings. The grief is important. It's difficult to go through. You do truly miss that physical person, and there's just no way to minimize it, but simply to be with someone as they're experiencing it and to acknowledge it and not in any way, shape, or form minimize it. It's just so important.
I love what you all said. There's not much to add. So really, brilliant. Thank you. And I love what, if you're familiar with Ram Dass, I know he passed and transitioned maybe a year or two ago. He had some quote that said, "You could be as far in the stars as can be and transcend, but you still have to change the tire or go to the DMV or do all these things." And so a point that I'm trying to make is, I think a lot of people have judgment of themselves and what they go through, and they feel I'm transcended. I shouldn't feel, and that's a part of being human. We're a spiritual being having this human experience. But so much of this experience is really to broaden our heart and to understand it on a deeper level. Because I don't think we're just going through this for ourselves, but I think so much of this is to able to understand other people in this experience. And when we do cross over, become a guide, and we are able to have that understanding from our own experience. But, I love the quote that really says, within the dead of the winter, you could find a summer. And I think with any bit of difficulty or hardship, that is the beauty of transformation. It doesn't mean that the person or the situation is exactly how it was, but you evolve with it, you grow with it, and eventually you find that you are transformed in your own way. But there are plenty of organizations, out there, and I think
Mhm.
the difficulty is when you're going through things is isolation. And, isolation to me is feeling very alone in your experience and not connected. And certainly as a near-death experiencer, we probably had that for a bit of time. I know I had that for almost 2 decades where I didn't even know what this was called or the terminology behind it. So finding support, finding good people. I know Jeff is a champion of one organization that I'm going to speak with on Monday called Helping Parents Heal, which
Mm.
works very closely, with those parents and shining star parents who have, have kids who transition. Other organizations are great. Forever Family Foundation's great. I know I work with them, a couple times. So, when there's a readiness, have support and understanding that there's a collective force that could really propel you and carry you forward, that you're not doing this alone. There's those in the spirit here with you, but those here in the physical that come through, as angels in human form too, that could, just be there and really join you and elevate, the transformation that you could experience with grief. And you will within time.
That's fantastic, Jake. They're an amazing organization and international. They're worldwide. There's chapters of Helping Parents Heal all over the world, and they do such good work in just supporting one through the grief process. It's a process. There's no way to go around it. You're going to go through it. And anyway, yeah, you don't have to go through it alone. And they're a fantastic organization. They're having a big conference in Phoenix in August.
They're
And
great.
I'll be there. You may be there too, Jake, but it's going to be an
One day.
incredible gathering. Yeah.
Anyone else?
No,
All right. Final question. You all have talked tonight about how this life is an experience that our soul is having. So, how can we get the most out of this life experience while we're here?
Wow. Live it. Live it. Live your life. Go out and do the things that bring you joy. For me, and I'm older and gray now, but I tell you what, the joy is in the little things. And the joy is in the little things. I don't see a sunset anymore without thinking, wow, that's a miracle. I don't see a flower bloom without saying, wow, that's a miracle. I don't see the leaves, change on the trees and flutter to the ground without saying, wow, that's a miracle. It doesn't, life, all of our lives are unique. We're going to have unique and different experiences, but our emotions are what connects us. Our emotions are what we have universal. And live life. Let your emotions flow. Be happy. Be sad. Be angry. Be joyful. Be in love. Be all of those things, because that's what we came for. That's what we came for. Here's more biblical. I remember when Jesus said, "For this cause came I into the world." And as we're going about our day-to-day lives, whether that's joyful or painful, for this cause is why we came. So enjoy it. Let the emotions flow. Live your life. And love the people around you. Love the people around you. Love is the most powerful force in the universe. And as you love the people around you, please remember to love yourself. I'd become so good at loving the neighbors. Love your neighbor as yourself. And the near experience unlocked the key for me to realize I could love myself, that I was enough, and that I had a unique contribution in this time around, in this realm. And by being it, I could simply be perfect by simply being me. You're perfect just the way you are. So live your life and be happy.
I always come back to feeling, and that's just such a takeaway from my experiences. We are experiencing what it feels like to be a soul in a physical body. And so I would encourage people to ask themselves, if they could feel the best they could possibly feel, what would that be? And if their answer doesn't reflect their state of being in that moment, then be curious about what you can do to get there. And if you can allow yourself just a little bit of room to explore and be curious about what that would be if you were to take away all judgment, all fear, and just sit for a moment and have the faith in yourself that you are a powerful creator. We have so much creative potential. We haven't even scratched the surface. And if you could have absolute control to create your experience, would you make different choices in your life? And if you would, then what's keeping you from making those choices now? And it's just a matter of exploration, but having the courage to know that you can have those questions. They're questions that really will help you move forward. And in the end, it really comes down to your experience here is something that you can create the best feeling that you could ever imagine if you have the courage to step into it.
I'd like to say too that, I think it comes down to show your whole soul fearlessly. And that's the good, the bad, and the ugly. You don't have to be some sort of paragon of virtue to be able to relate to other people and to be able to show them that love that you have within. So I guess that's what I think is, don't be afraid. Be fearless. Don't wear a mask and try to be something. Just be your whole soul and be it fearlessly.
Yeah. I learned so much from Albert Einstein. And, he posed such a great question, and a point, which the most important question that we have to live our lives governed by is the universe or God or however you want to look at it, a loving place or not, or a limited place or not. And I think near death experiencers come with this message of knowing, and trust in this higher intelligence that we're connected to that's navigating our lives that is occurring while we're here. And I think sometimes we go through this lifetime feeling alone in this vacuum, forgetting there's this infinite intelligence that was behind, the life that was charted and that we lived and that we go through. And so I think so much of that is about trust and a knowing and trusting an infinite intelligence more so than our at times limited perceptional viewpoints. And that will transform a limited life to an unlimited life. And I think a lot of the life that we live is parlayed by our faith and our relationship and perceptional viewpoint, of that exact reference. And, it trajects the life that we live. But yes, chop wood and carry water, as a Buddhist would say. I think it's important to do the work still. We're here to be human. Our time is there. I once went to my grandmother and I was upset because the summer was ending, and she's 97 years old, and she says, "Don't worry, it will come back. It will come back." And I allude to summer as the infinite world. And we're going through this in this life. We sometimes worry that this won't end. We'll never, go on. How we go through this, but we always persevere. We always move forward. We, cannot be damaged or harmed on a macro basis. And all these experiences are just there for uh, growth, expansion, evolution, and it's a gift. So I think, yes, what Jeff alluded to and the great Thich Nhat Hanh, lived his life by is to focus on being versus doing. We're a human being, not a human doing, so it's in the being part.
You guys inspire me. I love what you say. I mean, we've talked a lot about, Jesus and the Bible. How many times did he say, fear not, become as a little child. This is where joy is. I mean, in that awe and wonder of, gosh, when my boys were little, they'd be completely entertained with a stick and a bug all day long. It was the musing of being in this body, being in this realm, having the experience we're having, and yet letting go of judgments, comparisons, fears, and simply being in that joyful state of a child in awe, saying, wow, trust. I mean, I think if I was to put in words, my faith and my beliefs were absolutely transformed through the experience into trust, into just trust. It's all going to be okay.
I just want to say that I noticed with all of your responses to this question that you're not giving some list of spiritual practices to do to become enlightened like some spiritual teachers might do, but you're all saying just be here, be in this experience, be like a child and trust and love it, love all of it. And I think we tend to lose that in the spiritual community, the religious community for sure, but also the spiritual community, we tend to lose that.
I think we forget that, there are wavelengths of light that we can't see with our eyes, or sounds we can't hear with our ears. And there are just concepts that we're not going to necessarily be able to wrap our heads around about why we're here and the totality of our existence here in the physical body. But when we boil it all down, it is a matter of experience. We came here to have a physical experience, and to have that experience is absolutely integral to the entire whole. We each need to have this experience. It's an important part of what makes the oneness, the God, the divinity, what it is. It couldn't exist without us.
All right. Does anyone have anything else they'd like to share before we wrap it up?
Maybe we could do one last statement by each experiencer. Like with that, what do you think by that, guys? Is that like one last message?
Yeah,
That's
absolutely.
my favorite question by every interviewer. I love that.
Okay, yeah. What's one final message that you'd like to share?
Who would like to go first?
Oh gosh, I've been going first only so I can get it over with, so I can just concentrate. I don't want to be thinking about what to say. I've enjoyed listening to you all, and I want to stay connected if possible.
Oh,
Closing words. It's a choice. That was the profound thing in my near-death experience, is that now I embrace. There's only one cosmic rule, and that is free will and choice. You get to choose. In all that choice, let's choose joy. Choose joy for yourself and for others, and lean into that energy, and see what that doesn't shift. We're so powerful as creators. Everything that's been said, it's like, oh, I love it. But yeah, choose joy. You are in control, no matter what happens to you, and you can't control that, but you can control how you experience it and what you learn from it, and therefore gratitude can rise out, and you can choose to be joyful no matter what happens.
I would say that for those of you familiar with my NDE, I know in the intro, I'm sorry I didn't share it, but I had my near-death experience in a playground at the age of 3 years old. Due to the whipping cough, and I suffocated. And there's a lot of allegorical and symbolical, levels to my NDE, but the one thing that stands out is the playground, and how we're all our brothers and sisters keepers here in God's playground. And I think a lot of people focus on mysticism as something up in the higher etherical, but I think mysticism is found in relationships and how we're able to treat each other. Because I don't think our survival depends on it, but I don't think our thrival depends on it, but our survival depends on the interconnectedness that we have and our ability, to really connect each other, and to not just have oneness as a new age talking point, but something that we integrate and live our lives by. And I think also to live our life by how God thinks and how God sees. That part is really within us, and to look at life through that God lens. And I think there's many different ways to look at it from religions or other belief systems. At times, it could look down, from a possessiveness and accomplishment, and down on a people. But I think really the God eyes is looking up, and to see the beauty, and to see, the potential and the true nature of all things, always and always. So that's my last message for tonight.
well, I think that my final message would be that trust and faith are such a foundational thing to our lives here and our experiences that we have on earth. And I think that given that we're all given free will, I just say consciously using free will, make those choices that allow you to express love and connect with others and expand their experience and your own. That interconnectedness between all of us leads to that oneness that is what we're really here to understand and achieve.
Well, if I were to sum it up, I would say it's what I've echoed since I've started sharing my story, and that in this physical life, there is no good or bad. There is no right or wrong. There are no lessons to learn in a way that is going to impact what you're going to experience on the other side. You're absolutely whole and complete. Your soul is whole and complete. And you get an opportunity to learn what it means to have a physical experience. But this learning isn't about a worthiness. It isn't about trying to check a box. It isn't your pathway to a heaven or a hell. Your internal heaven and hell is right here. And as cliche as that sounds, you can create it now. And so when you get to the other side, you're going to realize that the oneness that you are is the same oneness that we all are. So when you're looking through your eyes, you're actually looking through the eyes of every single person who's ever lived.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. I just want to say how honored and blessed I am to have been able to sit in on this conversation. and just take everything in, all of your shared experience and wisdom. It's definitely one of the best things that I have ever done. So it's that inspiring to me. So thank you so much to each one of you for being here and for participating.
Thank you for putting this together, Melissa. I mean, how
Yeah,
uplifted I just feel right now. It's beautiful. Thank you.
Yeah, you're so welcome. Thank you. Thank you. And I've reached out. I just shoot me an email. Let's stay connected as a group. This is a pretty interesting little quartet here. And Melissa, thank you for bringing us together, and thank you for allowing me to be a part of it. I'm grateful.
Oh, of course.
Melissa, I think there was the gift of you in deciding that these 4 individuals, 3 individuals, all of us, because you were the orchestrator, was very much meant to be, and was a unique and very special experience for all of us concerned.
Well, each one of you impacted my life already, which was why I thought to invite you back. So thank you for that as well.
Thank you. I know my computer had a near-death experience. I was supposed to talk about one, but thank you for having all of us. I learned so much from all of you. Thank you.
It's just your energy, Jake. It's your energy. It zaps out those electronics. You're just too connected still.
It's allegory. I can't get away from it. Yeah.
What an honor.
Each
All
of
right,
you,
guys.
each of you were such a gift. You know,
Thanks,
it
Gary.
was wonderful.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. You all have a
Thank you.
beautiful night, and be healthy and be safe and be loved. Be loved.
Thank you.
Yes.
Yes, you guys.
Thank you.
Yes.
Good night.
Good night.